My name is Norma D. Page, and I am 29 years old. I got engaged to my fiancé 8 months ago. We'd been together for 3 years, living together for the last year and a half, and everything looked steady from the outside. We split bills. We talked about the future like it was something we were building together, not something we were waiting to inherit. The wedding was set for next spring, the venue already picked, the guest list slowly growing, the kind of normal planning that makes you believe you're safe. Here's what matters. My dad owns a successful plumbing business. Not flashy money, not private jets, but he built it from nothing over 35 years, and it's done well. My grandfather also left a few properties when he passed 5 years ago. Between the business, the properties, and my parents' savings, there's probably around 2.8 million in assets. I have a younger brother, so one day that would be split. My fiancé knew my family was comfortable. I didn't hide it, but I didn't flaunt it either. I work a normal job with a decent salary. We lived within our means. Last Tuesday, I was at work when I got a text from him that made my stomach tighten in a way I didn't understand at first. He wrote that he'd had a really productive lunch meeting with a lawyer and wanted to understand how inheritance laws work in our state after marriage. He said it was super interesting and that we should discuss estate planning soon. He sent it like it was a fun fact, like something you'd learn in a podcast, not something you pay a lawyer to map out. I stared at the message for a full minute. He'd gone to a lawyer about my family's money without telling me first. So I texted back one word, smart. Then I called my dad. I told him exactly what my fiancé had written. There was a long pause on the line. My dad didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He just asked one question. What do you want to do? I didn't hesitate. Can you write me out temporarily? I said, just until I figure this out. He told me to come by the office after work. That evening, my dad had already called his lawyer. Within 48 hours, I was completely removed from the will. Everything would go to my brother if something happened to my parents. The lawyer made it airtight but reversible, quiet, clean, protective. My dad didn't dramatize it. He treated it like installing a lock after someone tested the door. Meanwhile, my fiancé came home that Tuesday night chatting about wedding centerpieces like nothing had happened. He didn't mention the lawyer meeting at all. And I didn't bring it up either. I smiled, nodded, acted normal, and watched him move around our apartment like a man who thought the ground beneath him was solid. By Thursday, the cracks started. Thursday night, his phone rang while we were on the couch. He glanced at the screen and stood up too quickly, like his body moved before his brain could catch up. He took the call in the bedroom and closed the door. I didn't press my ear against it, didn't need to. His voice carried anyway. What do you mean there's nothing? He said. That can't be right. But her father owns... Check again. What about the properties? Nothing. When he came back out, his face had lost its color. I asked if everything was okay. He said it was just work stuff and sat too close to me like proximity could fix whatever he'd just heard. Friday morning over breakfast, he suggested a prenup. The way he said it felt rehearsed, careful, like he'd practiced in the mirror. I agreed immediately and said we should both get our own lawyers. His fork froze midair. Both, he repeated, then suggested we use the same one to save money. I told him that wasn't how prenups worked. He dropped it, but the disappointment sat between us like a third plate on the table. Over the next week, the questions started coming in sideways. He asked if my dad had talked about succession planning yet. He wondered out loud if my brother was responsible enough to handle anything long-term. He asked why my dad hadn't officially brought me into the business. Each time I answered vaguely and watched his reactions like tells in a bad poker game. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was probing for doors. Saturday night, his mom called and invited us to dinner the next evening. We arrived to find it wasn't just a casual meal. His parents were there, his brother Kyle too, the one who had started 5 businesses and somehow failed all of them, while calling himself an entrepreneur. His mom brought up the wedding budget before we even sat down, said maybe we should revisit it now that we knew more about family situations. I asked what situation she meant. My fiancé tried to interrupt, but she kept going, saying the groom's family traditionally contributes more, and that with my family's resources, it made sense to adjust expectations. I said we were paying for our own wedding. Kyle laughed and said it must be nice to keep all that family money while my future husband struggled. I told him my fiancé made a good living and that we were fine. His mom started to say, but with what you'll inherit, and I cut in. I'm not inheriting anything. The silence was immediate and absolute. My fiancé's head snapped toward me. "What?" he said, sharp enough to cut. I told them I'd been removed from my parents' will earlier that week and that it seemed responsible to do before marriage. His mother demanded to know when I planned to tell them. I said it was my parents' money, not mine, and it didn't affect us. Kyle tried to smooth it over, said it was obviously temporary, that I was just protecting assets. I asked him what I was protecting them from. My fiancé stood up and said we needed to leave. The car ride home was quiet until the door closed behind us. Then the dam broke. He accused me of making a unilateral decision without discussing it with him. I reminded him he'd met with a lawyer about my inheritance without discussing it with me. He said that was different, that he was just getting information. I asked why he needed information about money that wasn't his and might never be mine. He said it was for planning our future. I asked why planning our future required calculating my parents' deaths. He cried, said he wanted security. I said we were secure. What we didn't have, apparently, was trust. He went to stay with a friend that night. Sunday afternoon, he came back with apologies and meals, and affection turned up too loud. He blamed panic, said a friend's divorce story had scared him. He said he saw how it looked now. He agreed a prenup was smart and said he supported independent lawyers. Then he asked me to talk to my dad about getting back into the will, because it wasn't fair for my brother to handle everything alone someday. I told him it wasn't my decision anymore. Thursday, his mom started texting me about how devastated he was and how marriage meant sharing everything. I didn't reply. Friday morning, his laptop was open when he went to shower. A message popped up from Kyle. "Did you try the emotional angle?" It read. "Dad says if that doesn't work, postpone the wedding until the inheritance situation is clearer." I took a photo with my phone and started packing a bag. When he came out, I told him I needed space to think about marrying someone who treated me like a lottery ticket. He said security mattered to him. I told him my family's money mattered to him. There was a difference. I left for my parents' house, and my phone lit up the entire weekend. I didn't answer. Staying at my parents' house felt strange at first, like I'd stepped backward in time, but it didn't take long for the calm to settle in. My dad didn't interrogate me. My mom didn't dramatize it. They listened. My brother found the whole thing darkly funny and said something that stuck with me. "So he basically pre-divorced you for money you don't even have." It shouldn't have made me laugh, but it did, because that was exactly what it felt like. By Tuesday morning, I went back to the apartment while he was at work. I wasn't packing yet. I was taking inventory. What was mine? What was his? What we'd bought together? I was looking for the lease when I opened a drawer in his desk and found the printouts. 3 emails, neatly stacked, creased like they'd been read more than once. The subject lines told me everything before I even read them. Understanding inheritance laws and marital property rights. Dated 3 weeks before the lunch meeting he'd mentioned. 3 weeks before he'd told me anything. The lawyer's reply outlined spousal rights, commingling, strategic planning. His response thanked him and asked specifically about scenarios with no prenup versus a standard prenup. 3 weeks. I photographed every page with my phone and put them back exactly where I found them. When he came home that evening, I was sitting at the table with the lease agreement spread out in front of me. He asked what I was doing. I told him I was figuring out the penalty for breaking it. He sat down slowly and told me not to do this, begged me to stop. I asked him how long he'd been planning to consult a lawyer about my inheritance. He said it wasn't planned, that it was just curiosity. I told him I'd found the emails. His face collapsed in a way that told me the truth before his mouth could catch up. He tried to explain. He talked about growing up without stability, about watching his mom struggle, about finally feeling safe with me. I listened until he said the quiet part out loud, that the money made him feel safe, that it gave him room to plan. I told him safety built on access to my parents' assets wasn't love. He insisted he loved me. I told him he loved the idea of me, the version that came with a trust fund that no longer existed. He reached for my hands and asked me to talk to my dad, to get back into the will, because my dad would do it for me. That was the moment everything went still. "Get out," I said. He asked what I meant. I told him to pack a bag and go to his parents' house or his friend's place. I gave him a week to find somewhere else. He argued that it was his apartment too. I told him his name wasn't on the lease and that we could fight about it legally if he wanted. He stared at me like I'd become someone else overnight. He said I'd changed, that I'd become cold. I told him I'd become aware. He packed while crying and yelling about our future and our love and what I was throwing away. As he left, he told me I'd regret this when I was 40 and alone. I told him I'd rather be alone than be someone's retirement plan. He slammed the door. The escalation started the next day. The wedding venue called to say he'd tried to cancel and get the deposit refunded to his account. I told them not to do anything yet. His father showed up at my office and demanded to talk woman to man, which would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. He accused me of destroying his son over a misunderstanding. I told him his son consulted a lawyer about my inheritance before we'd even finalized wedding details. He called it research. I called it strategy. He threatened to tell everyone what kind of person I really was. I told him to go ahead and include the lawyer emails when he did. Friday morning, I got an email from my ex-fiancé with the subject line, formal demand. He wanted a share of wedding deposits I'd paid entirely, compensation for emotional distress, 3 months of living expenses, and the engagement ring back, the ring I bought. I forwarded it to my cousin, who laughed for a full 5 minutes before telling me to keep documenting everything. Saturday, the social media posts started. He painted himself as the victim of a narcissistic ex who threw him out for planning responsibly. His family shared it. His friends shared it. I said nothing. My brother didn't. He posted screenshots of the lawyer emails, Kyle's message about postponing the wedding until the inheritance situation was clearer, and a single caption: "When you try to rob my family, then play victim." The comments were brutal. Some people deleted their supportive posts within hours. Monday morning, he showed up with a U-Haul and 3 movers, planning to take furniture while I was at work. Except I work from home on Mondays. I opened the door as he was directing them toward my couch. I asked for receipts. The movers froze. He tried to push past me. I stepped aside and called the police. He ran before they arrived, leaving the truck behind. I paid the movers for their time and locked the door. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be quiet, but it was going to be final. The next 2 months felt like living inside a cautionary tale everyone else swore would never happen to them. Once the U-Haul stunt failed, the story he and his family told about me got louder and sloppier. He moved back in with his parents and started telling anyone who would listen that I'd financially abused him by hiding assets and manipulating the legal system. He said I'd blindsided him, that I'd turned cold the moment he tried to be responsible about our future. His parents echoed it. His brother added color commentary. I documented everything and said nothing. Then he got engaged again. I found out the same way everyone finds out things now, through a tagged photo that popped up in a friend's feed. New fiancé, big smile, flashy ring. He'd moved fast, which didn't surprise me. What surprised me was the backstory that followed. Mutual acquaintances said she was older, recently divorced, and owned a car dealership. He'd found someone whose stability didn't require waiting on my parents' will. I wished her luck in the abstract and closed the app. His family didn't stop, though. Nasty messages arrived from new numbers, thinly veiled threats about reputations, suggestions that I owed him support because I'd encouraged his planning. My cousin advised me to keep saving screenshots. If they kept it up, we could file for harassment. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but hope wasn't something I was betting on anymore. The wedding venue resolved itself quietly. A friend of mine needed a location on short notice to propose and later host a small ceremony. I transferred the reservation at a discount and attended their wedding a month later. It was beautiful and uncomplicated, the kind of day that reminded me what commitment looks like when it's built on trust instead of leverage. He wasn't invited. Somehow he found out anyway and posted about how I was rubbing my happiness in his face. I was just eating chicken marsala and dancing with my friends. My dad eventually put me back into the will, but with changes. Any inheritance would be placed in a trust inaccessible to a spouse for 5 years after marriage. It was his idea. He said it calmly, like a man who had learned the cost of assumptions. I thanked him and told him I hoped we'd never have to test it. Therapy helped. Naming what happened helped more. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't cold. I reacted to a betrayal that hid behind planning language and smiles. The red flags had been there all along. The jokes about being a kept woman. The sudden curiosity about my dad's business. The casual, when we're rich someday, comments that I'd interpreted as ambition and now recognized as expectation. The engagement didn't create the greed. It gave it permission to show up. The ring went first. I sold it and used the money to build a home theater I'd wanted for years. Every time I sit down to watch a movie on that big screen, I think about how his impatience paid for my peace. It's petty, maybe, but it makes me smile. I started dating again when I felt ready, not because I was lonely, but because I was curious. The first person I went out with insisted on splitting the check and laughed when I told her why that mattered to me. It was refreshing in a way I hadn't realized I needed. If there's a lesson here, it's not about prenups or wills or money. It's about listening when someone shows you what they value and believing them the first time. If a partner starts meeting with lawyers about money that isn't even yours yet, run. If their family treats your family's work like a lottery ticket, run faster. If they love your potential inheritance more than the life you're actually building, don't wait for a wedding to prove it. My name is Norma D. Page. I didn't lose a future. I avoided one built on entitlement. The best money my family ever saved was the money I never had to spend on a divorce. My dad still jokes about it. He's not wrong.